Welcome to Hey Jude, What's Cooking? Today we're actually going to make a lovely veggie dish called Mo-Shu veg. Now you can also have Mo-Shu chicken, Mo-Shu pork, Mo-Shu shrimp, Mo-Shu tofu. In this case, I just wanted to keep it really simple and just do a big array of vegetables. So let me just show you what I have prepared. I've got cabbage, sliced cabbage. I have, I julienned a lot of the veg, which is very typical for Mo-Shu. So I have for my aromatics, my scallions, julienned. I also have minced garlic, julienned ginger, and then celery, a little bit of red pepper. This is the Chinese long red peppers that are spicy. This is called tree ear or wood fungus. It's a type of fungus or mushroom, and it comes already pre-sliced, which is wonderful. You just have to soak this in hot water. And then, of course, shiitake mushrooms, which were also dried, which I also pre-soaked for about 30 minutes in hot water. You could just boil off water, take it off the stove, and throw in your dried veg. For seasoning, we're going to fry in just a very basic, light vegetable oil. But we're also going to season with 2 teaspoons of soy sauce and a little bit of sesame oil. The hoisin is the condiment that's served with the Mo-Shu, and actually the Mo-Shu is eaten in pancakes. So I went ahead and made some of the pancake dough, but for your benefit, I just wanted to go over how to make it. Essentially, it's just flour and hot water. It's 1.5 cups flour and 1/2 cup of really hot water and salt. That's it. So let's go ahead and start that. These are 1/2 cup measures, so I'm going to do 3 of them for 1.5. Always level off your flour. When it comes to baking, you really want to have exact measurements. It's not necessary to sift this, but if you like to sift it and you enjoy doing that, feel free. But I don't think it's that necessary. I'm going to just simply mix my salt into the flour and make a well. This well is important. It really helps me make a good dough without a machine. So the next thing I'm going to do is get my hot water. You can use boiling water or just hot water. If you use hot water, please let it run for a while until it really feels hot. Okay, the next thing, I'm going to measure out my 1/2 cup of water. Yeah, that's pretty hot. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to the well. And I'd like you to see that it's sort of like a slurry in the middle. And I'm very, very slowly adding the dough from the outside, just mixing it until I have sort of a ball of dough, at which point I'll start kneading it. I'm going to try to get as much flour to sort of hook onto that little ball of dough that's attached to my fork right now before I start kneading it. Just try to get every little bit of surface covered with that flour. So I'm pushing the fork really into the side where the flour is. Now I'm going to take that off and knead it. The reason I pre-made the dough is because it needs to rest for 30 minutes. So I wanted to give the dough a chance to rest. But let me just go ahead and knead it and talk to you about how to knead. Essentially, you're going to have a little bit of bench flour, which is the flour that you knead with. And as opposed to using the sort of stringy leftover flour that we find here, and you can see it, it's sort of dry and stringy, resist that urge and get fresh flour. So I'm going to just grab one little bit of bench flour. And also, don't add too much flour at once. Dough wants to incorporate flour slowly. So as you knead, you're going to just slowly incorporate this flour. And you're pushing down, folding, and then getting it to adhere and folding. And you know that you have to keep kneading when it's sticky. So it's very sticky. So I'm just going to keep kneading it until it's smooth and supple and kind of resembles the texture of an earlobe. So I'm going to keep doing this and adding little bits of flour as I go. Also, if you notice, there are some sort of rough, it looks very rough. This doesn't look like my earlobe. So I know it's not smooth enough yet. And the proof really is in the kneading. And speaking of proofing, because this doesn't rise, you don't have to wait for proofing, but you do have to rest it so the gluten that you've agitated by kneading it relaxes, and therefore it's easier to roll out. Any rested dough is much easier to work with. And that's why when you go to a pizza store and you see all the pizza dough portioned out and resting, that's why it's that way, because people prefer to work with dough that's rested. Now you can also store dough very, very well in the fridge. Yeast activated dough, which this is not, has more of a shorter lifespan than this kind of dough, but this dough freezes very well as well. So you could go ahead and make your Mo-Shu pancakes and freeze them, and just take them out when you're ready to serve Mo-Shu. So I'm just going to do this for a little while longer so I can just show you what smooth dough kind of looks like. I'm almost there. You're going to notice that the floury surface sort of leaves the dough. So it's still somewhat floury. I know I'm not there yet. The other thing is you're going to notice less striations in the dough and more of a really very, very smooth surface. I'm not there yet, but what I want to do is I want to start the rest of my project. So I'm just going to leave this here and move to the rested dough just to give you a sense of what it should look like when we're done kneading. It's a very big difference. And you can get that there with about 10 more minutes of kneading. For this project, I'm going to just start with this dough and let this one rest for later. So we've got our beautiful Mo-Shu pancake dough. Very, very, very smooth. And I'll let this rest to the side. And in terms of cutting this, we're going to portion this into about 8 pancakes, so 4 for each half. And I'm going to need a little bit more bench flour down. Now, these are 8 pieces, but they actually make 4 pancakes because we put 2 pancakes together when we cook these. So this is, I will turn on my frying pan and get that kind of hot. And I've got my bench flour down here, rolling pin. And what you're going to do is you want to make a little pancake. So I'll start it off like this. And I want to roll this out. And it only has to be a few inches big. Remember, it's easier to roll it out if you move the dough as opposed to moving yourself. So if you want to get something that really resembles a circle, feel free to move this guy around a little bit. Okay, that's one. And then let me do this guy. Now with this Mo-Shu, it's a very, very thin pancake that resembles a flour tortilla. And then you roll up your Mo-Shu veg or your Mo-Shu pork or chicken or whatever you're making, but your Mo-Shu, you roll it up in the flour tortilla, or rather the Mo-Shu pancake, which is what it's called, with a little bit of hoisin added as a condiment. So it's almost like a, I wouldn't call it a burrito. It's almost like a wrap, a sandwich wrap. Now, the trick with this is you have 2 pancakes that you put together with a little bit of sesame oil. This sesame oil serves as a way to rip the pancakes apart. And then we put this on top. And the tricky part now is to roll this guy out really thin. So I'm going to go from the center off the edge. And I'm going to keep turning it so I can make it as round as possible. Center off the edge. And what we're doing now, as I'm heating this up, I just want to remind you that this is called a dry fry. When you don't have any oil in the pan and you're just cooking something like a tortilla or a little bit of naan, Indian bread, or anything that you don't use oil or butter for, it's called a dry fry, and you want to really be aware of it and not walk away from it, because you really have to manipulate everything very quickly, turning everything so that nothing burns. So if you can get a close-up of this, you can actually see where the two pancakes are kind of meeting. And that's important because that's where we're going to rip them apart after we get it really, really nice and thin. So let me just continue a little bit more. I'm almost there, guys. Trying to get this as thin as possible. I would say that this is about 6 inches. I think I started with about a 4-inch, 3 to 4 inch circle, and I've got it pretty darn thin. It's about the thickness of a flour tortilla. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in here and just let it cook for a little bit. And I'm turning it ever so gently so that it won't burn in any particular spot and it'll just fry. Or really, what we're really doing is we're kind of baking it on the stove. And you can see it's starting to get opaque. That's what we're looking for. We're also going to look for little bits of bubbles. We don't necessarily want it to brown, but we want little bits of bubbles so it can puff up, which will help us separate this dough. While I'm waiting for that guy, I'll start one more. Okay, let me check this guy. That's what we're looking for. Do you see the little raised bubbles surface? It's getting a little bit brown. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of sesame oil. I like to use sesame oil. It tastes great. Gives it a lot of flavor. And I will roll this guy out. Then I'll put this on top of this guy. Good. Make sure both sides are covered with flour. And meanwhile, let me check this guy. Good, we're getting there. And from the center out. If you have a lot of sesame oil, it might ooze out, which is what's happening right here. Don't worry about that. That's not going to affect anything. It's not a problem. Just keep persisting and trying to get it as thin as you can when you roll it out. And you'll notice it's starting to move away from each other. So I'm almost ready to pull it apart. And this is a great way to get really thin tortillas. So we've got it, and here we go. And this is 2 Mo-Shu pancakes. And what I try to do is keep these warm in the oven. So let's get this one in there. Good. And I'm going to start my Mo-Shu. So turn it on high. Whenever you stir fry, you really want a high. In terms of the bread, a medium is fine. I had it on a high. I'm going to bring it down to a medium because I don't need to cook it quite that quickly. I'm going to actually move it because this is an electric stove. It takes a while for it to come down to temp. In terms of cooking with this, just a tiny bit of oil. And the one thing I've also done is I went ahead and beat a couple eggs, 2 eggs in a cup. And what I do to season it is just add a tiny bit, about a teaspoon of soy sauce for flavor. We're used to adding salt and pepper to our eggs, but soy sauce is very common with Chinese cuisine. And in the eggs, it gives it a really nice umami texture, flavor. It's just a really, really great proteinaceous flavor. Now, egg is always part of Mo-Shu, so I'm going to start the egg first. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to bring this guy back, turn it around, and let me just get a spoon for my eggies, or a spatula, that'll work. And we're going to just scrape this. It's not quite there yet, so I'm going to focus on this guy because this is almost done. Do spin this around a little bit. It helps move the heat around. Also, if this is too hot for you to handle, grab a rag. There's no reason why you can't use a rag to pull these things apart. It might help you a little bit. And the question is, when is it right to sort of pull them apart? Well, you can see the majority has been cooked. Slight bubbles, you know, the bubbles actually are inside. They're starting to bubble up. If you can really see that, it's really raised. It looks like a big bubble here and there. And that's perfect. That actually helps in the pulling apart of this. So, grab them and pull them. And these are gorgeous. Also, if you don't want to keep these warm, you can just do them to order right before you serve your Mo-Shu. Okay, so this is almost like a little bit of an omelet, but it's more like scrambled eggs in the Mo-Shu. So I'm just going to go ahead and scramble it. And that's fine. I don't want to overcook my eggs because they'll be tough. So I'm just going to take them out as soon as they're pretty solid, which pretty much, I'm almost there. One more second. Yeah, that's good. Remember, I'm going to add this back in, so I don't want to overcook it. So I'm going to scrape the bottom a little bit, and I'm going to add my oil and start with my veg. So, in terms of the veg, we want to add our aromatics first. This is our garlic, a lot of garlic. The ginger, julienne ginger, scallions, peppers. This gives a little bit of heat, so if people are sensitive, maybe don't use quite so much. And give those a little toss for a quick second. I just want them to flavor my oil a little bit with the garlic and the ginger. Start smelling incredible. I'm going to put a tiny bit more oil and then a little bit of sesame oil because that's so delicious. Just about a tablespoon. Okay. Okay, the next thing I'm going to go ahead and add my veg. In this case, it's shredded cabbage. Go ahead and help out the cabbage a little bit by continuing to shred it as you put it in. The big pieces can be just broken up. This is my celery, julienne celery. These are my shiitake mushrooms. Wonderful. They really add an earthiness. These are my tree fungus, sliced. And that is about it. And now I'm just going to move this around in the aromatic oil. The only thing that we season the Mo-Shu with is really sesame oil and soy sauce. We have no need to add any salt to this veg because actually we've already added the salt in the form of soy sauce. So it's really well seasoned. In terms of this, I don't like to add more oil. I actually like to add more water to this to steam my vegetable, just to get it a little bit softer. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of water and just put a couple drops in, just to add a little bit of steam. You can hear it, and now you can kind of see it. And that steam works really well to just get this to cook a little bit more and actually to soften up. You don't want this too cooked, but you want it somewhat soft. And when I can't see any more steam, I'll add a little bit more water. And the last thing I'll add is my seasoning, which is soy sauce and a little more sesame oil. So just a little more, a couple little drops along the way. You can hear it. This is a great low-fat way to cook your veg by just using a little bit of steam to help you along. Smells incredible. Now, when the cabbage has softened up to a really good extent, Then you can add your seasonings. I'm not quite there, but I'm almost there. I think I might do a little more steam one more time. Let me get rid of this steam first. Okay, just a tiny bit more. Remember, it's just a couple drops. You don't add too much because then you won't have steam. You'll just have a lot of water on the bottom of your wok. You really want to hear that shh and see the steam rising, and then take full advantage of it by moving things around quickly in that steam. A lot of people salt their veg at this point. Resist the urge to salt because it'll be too salty if you add your soy sauce as well. In terms of the soy sauce, I'm just adding about 2 teaspoons. I'm going to drizzle it in so it makes a little bit of steam as well. Tiny bit. And if you notice, it's really softening up nicely now. It's reduced in size. There's a lot less here. And it's really softened. The next thing I'm going to add is just a little sesame oil, just a drizzle of sesame oil to give it some yummy flavor. Also, taste what you cook. In other words, how do you know that there's enough salt and pepper, or in this case, sesame oil and soy sauce, if you don't taste it? It's the most important thing that any chef will tell you is as you're cooking, taste what you're making. Taste it before, taste it during, taste it after. But make sure you taste it. So I'm going to dip in, have a little piece, something. It's very good. It has enough salt, it has enough body, and it has enough flavor. The other thing I realize is I'm using a really very strong condiment, hoisin, which is sort of China's version of their favorite condiment, which would be our ketchup. They use it in a lot of things. This is made out of beans and sugar, has a great earthy flavor, and it's really used in Mo-Shu. This is the typical, as well as other dishes, but in Mo-Shu it certainly is very much integral and part of the dish, as well as the pancakes, which are served alongside. So we are almost there. The last thing I'm going to add are the eggs. In this case, I'm not going to add them today because I have a crew member who's going to help us eat this who doesn't eat eggs. But normally we would add them, and people can add them as they like. If you have people that are allergic to eggs, leave them out. No reason. So I'm going to turn this off, and then I'm just going to show you how to serve this Mo-Shu. Essentially, you take one of these pancakes, and they're very thin. They're really, it's better than a tortilla. It's really thin, and it's pliable. It's soft. Whereas sometimes when you make tortillas, they're really hard. What keeps this pliable is all the sesame oil. And then I'm going to just simply, oopsie, get it all over my face. Put a little dash there. I'm going to put this in a serving dish. And then I'll go ahead and serve the Mo-Shu. Could I get London to come in here and taste this for me? London is one of our favorite students here. Hi, sweetheart. I want you to try this and give me, do you want egg or no egg?
Egg.
Okay. Just a little bit. Egg gives this sort of creaminess to this Mo-Shu, which is kind of nice. And then we're going to wrap it. We actually, it's almost like making a burrito. Yes. Here, sweetheart. I want you to taste that and tell me what you think. Careful, it's hot. You like it? I'm a success. So, this is Hey Jude, What's Cooking? I'm sorry I have a little hoisin on my nose, but welcome, and I'm glad you came. If you're interested in sending your kids to summer at Park, I also teach there during the summer. I teach little kids, but normally I just teach high school students at Brookline High School, which I love, and encourage your kids to take my class. And if they can't, watch Hey Jude, What's Cooking and experiment at home. Thank you, bon appetit, and see you next week.